Maya had always been a bright girl with a gentle smile and a hopeful heart. When her family moved into the quiet town of Brookville, she carried with her the same dream most teenagers did to fit in, make friends, and find her place. Brookville looked peaceful on the outside, with tree-lined streets, small shops, and neighbors who waved politely when passing by. But Maya knew that sometimes appearances could be deceiving. She had grown up learning to be strong, because life did not always welcome people who were different. Her father, Marcus, had spent most of his life serving in the Navy. He had been gone for long stretches of time, traveling to places Maya only read about in books. To her, he was more than a father, he was a hero. Yet Marcus never spoke about his missions or the dangers he faced. He believed a home should be a place of peace, not a reminder of war. When he was around, he told jokes, helped with homework, and cooked pancakes on Saturday mornings. To Maya, he was simply Dad, the man with a steady voice and eyes that carried wisdom. Starting at a new school was never easy. Maya knew this well, having moved more than once because of her father's assignments. On her first day, she dressed neatly, choosing a plain white shirt and jeans, hoping to blend in. She carried her backpack tightly on her shoulder as she walked into Brookville High. The building buzzed with the chatter of students, the ringing of lockers, and the squeak of shoes on polished floors. Maya's heart pounded, but she held her head high, reminding herself of her father's words, "Walk with confidence, even if you feel nervous." People respect those who respect themselves. The first few hours passed quietly. Teachers introduced her as the new student, and some classmates offered polite smiles. At lunch, she sat alone, unpacking her sandwich while glancing around the crowded cafeteria. Groups of friends laughed together, sharing stories she wasn't yet a part of. It wasn't loneliness that bothered her most, but the feeling of being invisible. By the end of the week, whispers began. A few students stared longer than usual. Some asked her where she was from, their tone curious but not always kind. Maya answered politely, keeping her voice steady. She tried not to notice the small group of students who snickered when she walked by, whispering behind their hands. She told herself it didn't matter. She had faced this before, and she would stay strong again. At home, Maya's mother encouraged her to be patient. "Friendships take time, sweetheart," she said while cooking dinner. Her father nodded in agreement, reminding her that not everyone understood new people right away. "Keep showing them who you are," he said gently. "In the end, people notice kindness and strength more than anything else." Maya believed him, though deep inside, she wished fitting in could be a little easier. One sunny morning, Maya carried her books to class when a boy accidentally bumped into her in the hallway. Her books scattered on the floor, and before she could bend down, another student quickly picked one up for her. "Sorry about them," the boy said quietly, glancing at the group of students who had been watching. They laughed, nudging one another. Maya offered a thankful smile, but her heart sank. She realized those students weren't simply curious, they were testing her. Days turned into weeks, and while some students ignored her, others began to make their dislike clear. Maya walked past comments she pretended not to hear. She focused on her studies, raising her hand in class and answering questions with confidence. Teachers noticed her effort, praising her work. That seemed to bother the group of bullies even more. They whispered louder, their laughter sharper. But Maya refused to let them see her break. At night, lying in bed, she sometimes wondered why it was so hard to be accepted. She thought of the old friends she had made in other towns, friends she had left behind. She remembered how her father once told her that moving often meant starting over again and again. "It's not easy," he admitted, "but it teaches you how to grow strong roots no matter where you are planted." Maya tried to hold on to that wisdom, even when her days felt heavy. One Friday evening, her father came home earlier than expected. He had been gone for weeks, working on a special assignment. Maya's face lit up the moment she saw him walk through the door. She rushed into his arms, feeling the calm strength he always carried. Dinner that night was filled with laughter and stories. Marcus asked her about school, and Maya hesitated before answering. She didn't want to worry him. She spoke only of her classes, the subjects she enjoyed, and the projects she was working on. Marcus listened carefully, nodding, but his eyes searched her face. He could always tell when something was hidden behind her smile. The next morning, he joined her for a walk to the park. The air was cool, and leaves crunched beneath their feet. After a few minutes of silence, Marcus stopped and looked at her. "Maya," he said gently, "you don't have to carry everything alone. I know when something is troubling you. You can talk to me." His voice was calm, patient, but firm. Maya felt her throat tighten. She wanted to tell him about the whispers, the stares, the laughter. But instead, she said softly, "I just want to belong, Dad. That's all." Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. Belonging doesn't always come quickly. Sometimes people resist what they don't understand. But remember, you don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You are enough as you are. His words sank deep into her heart, wrapping around the part of her that felt fragile. She nodded, wiping a small tear that had slipped down her cheek. As they walked back, Marcus told her a story not about battles or missions, but about when he was a young recruit. He spoke of how some doubted his abilities, judged him before he even proved himself. But instead of letting their doubt define him, he pushed harder, showing through action who he was. "Respect isn't given," he said. "It's earned through how you carry yourself, even when no one else believes in you." Maya listened carefully, holding on to each word. That weekend gave her strength. She returned to school on Monday with a quiet determination. The whispers were still there, the stares hadn't disappeared, but she walked with her head high. Each step reminded her that she wasn't alone. Her family stood with her, even if no one else did. The days ahead would test her even more. The small cruelties would grow bolder, the challenges harder. Yet, in that moment, Maya carried her father's words like armor. She didn't yet know the storm that was coming, or how deeply her father's hidden strength would soon matter. For now, all she knew was that she had to keep walking forward, one step at a time, believing that light always followed the darkest shadows. Maya woke up Monday morning with a strange mix of hope and worry. She stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair carefully before pulling it back into a neat ponytail. She tried to convince herself that today would be different. Maybe people would finally see her for who she was, not just as the new girl. She carried her books close to her chest as she walked through the school gates, whispering a little prayer under her breath for courage. The hallways were already alive with chatter. Friends laughed loudly, catching up after the weekend, and lockers banged shut as students hurried to their classes. Maya moved quietly, keeping to herself. She had grown used to being invisible most of the time, but she also knew that invisibility came with a certain kind of peace. As long as no one noticed her, no one had a reason to hurt her. But that day, things began to shift. When Maya entered her English classroom, she felt eyes turn toward her. A few students giggled as she passed, their whispers sharp like tiny cuts. She focused on her desk, pretending not to notice, but her heart beat faster. As the teacher spoke about the assignment for the week, Maya forced herself to concentrate. She raised her hand to answer a question, her voice calm and steady. The teacher praised her insight, but instead of clapping or agreeing, the group of students at the back laughed louder. After class, when Maya walked toward her locker, she noticed something written in thick marker across the door. The words were ugly, meant to wound. She froze, staring at them, her throat tightening. A few students stood nearby, watching her reaction with smirks on their faces. For a moment, she wanted to cry, but she remembered her father's advice: don't give them the satisfaction. Slowly, she opened her locker as if nothing was wrong, even though her chest ached. That evening at home, Maya thought about telling her parents. She wanted to share the weight she carried, but when she saw her father laughing with her mother at the dinner table, she held back. She didn't want to take away his smile, not when he had just come back from weeks of work. Instead, she said she had a lot of homework and excused herself early, retreating to her room where she sat staring at the ceiling, wondering how long she could keep pretending. The next day, things grew worse. During lunch, as Maya sat alone with her tray, one of the bullies walked by and knocked over her drink, spilling juice across the table. The group behind him laughed as if it were the funniest thing they had ever seen. Maya quietly grabbed napkins and cleaned the mess without saying a word. Inside, though, she felt a storm building. She thought of all the places she had moved to before, all the times she had to start again. Why did it have to be so hard this time? Later that week, a small act of kindness reminded her not everyone was cruel. The same boy who had once helped her pick up her books came over to sit near her in the library. He didn't say much, just offered a quiet hello, but the simple gesture made her feel a little less alone. Still, his friendliness seemed to make the bullies angry. They began to notice anyone who spoke to her, and those students quickly pulled away, afraid of being targeted next. Maya's strength was tested again on Friday morning. She walked into the courtyard and felt the air go heavy. A small crowd of students had gathered near one of the big oak trees that stood in front of the school. At first, she thought maybe it was just a prank or some silly event, but as she got closer, her breath caught. Hanging from one of the lower branches was a rope tied into a cruel knot, swinging slightly in the wind. For a moment, everything around her went silent. She could hear only the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She knew exactly what it meant. The laughter, the stares, the whispers, all of it had led to this. Some students covered their mouths, shocked, while others stood back recording on their phones, waiting for her reaction. She felt the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on her, expecting her to cry, to scream, to fall apart. Maya did none of those things. She stood still, her face calm though her hands trembled at her sides. Inside, she felt both fear and fire. Fear, because she understood the ugliness of what had been done. Fire, because she refused to give them what they wanted. She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of the bullies who lingered nearby. They smirked, nudging each other, proud of what they had done. Maya held their gaze, steady and unbroken, before finally walking past them with quiet dignity. The rest of the day was a blur. Teachers rushed to take the rope down, the principal made an announcement condemning the act, and the students buzzed with whispers in every hallway. But no one came to Maya to ask if she was all right. No one offered comfort. She felt like she was standing in the middle of a storm, completely alone. That evening, she could no longer hide it. When she came home, her mother noticed her silence. Maya tried to eat dinner, but the food tasted like nothing. Her father watched her closely, his sharp eyes recognizing the weight she carried. After dinner, he gently asked her to join him in the living room. She sat quietly as he waited. Finally, with tears slipping down her cheeks, she told him everything. She spoke of the whispers, the stares, the cruel words on her locker. She told him about the spilled drink, the laughter, and finally, about the rope. Her voice shook as she described the way it hung from the tree, swinging in the air for everyone to see. For the first time since she had moved to Brookville, Maya allowed herself to cry in front of someone. Her father listened without interrupting. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but his voice remained calm when he finally spoke. "Maya," he said softly, "what they did was wrong. Beyond wrong. But I need you to know something important. It has nothing to do with who you are. It speaks only of their ignorance." Maya wiped her tears, looking at him with wide eyes. "But Dad," she whispered, "why do they hate me without even knowing me?" Marcus took a deep breath. He leaned forward, resting his hands gently on hers. "Because sometimes people fear what they don't understand. And sometimes, they try to make themselves feel stronger by making others feel smaller. But you, my daughter, are not small. You are strong. Stronger than they know." In that moment, Maya felt both comforted and curious. She had always known her father was strong, but there was a weight in his words that hinted at something deeper. She had never seen him look so serious, so protective. He didn't raise his voice, but she could feel his power in the quiet way he spoke. That night, after she went to bed, Marcus sat in the dark living room, his mind racing. He had faced danger before, in deserts and seas, in places where fear was meant to break men. But nothing compared to seeing his daughter hurt. He promised himself he would not allow this to continue. The world might not know who he was, but soon enough, those who dared to harm his child would understand that beneath his calm smile lived a strength they could never measure. Maya, lying in her room, whispered another small prayer before sleep. She didn't know what would happen next, but deep inside, she felt a spark of hope. She had shared her pain, and in return, she had seen the quiet fire in her father's eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt she wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. The weekend after Maya told her father everything felt heavy, but it also carried a new sense of relief. For the first time, she no longer carried the pain alone. Marcus had listened with such calm strength that it made her believe something would change. Still, on Sunday evening, as she packed her school bag, she felt her stomach twist with worry. She wondered what Monday might bring. Would the bullies go further? Would the whispers grow louder? Marcus, however, was not a man who sat back quietly when his family was threatened. He spent that Sunday preparing in his own way. While Maya worked on her homework at the dining table, Marcus sat nearby, writing notes in a small notebook. Every so often, he would glance up, watching her, as though reminding himself why he was doing this. He wasn't just a Navy SEAL, trained to face enemies in faraway places. He was a father, and this was the most important mission of all. When Monday came, Maya walked into school with her usual steady stride. She told herself not to look for the bullies, not to show fear, even though her heart pounded faster with every step. Some students stared, others avoided her eyes, and the group of bullies stood by the lockers, whispering among themselves. She ignored them, moving toward her class. But inside, she felt the tension like a shadow following her. At lunchtime, she sat under a tree near the edge of the courtyard, hoping to find a little peace. She opened her lunchbox, but the food didn't taste good. She thought about her father's words the night before, "You are strong. Stronger than they know." She wanted to believe it, but she also wished she didn't have to keep proving her strength over and over. Later that day, something unexpected happened. The principal called Maya into the office. She walked nervously through the hall, wondering if she had done something wrong. Inside, she found the principal sitting with two teachers and, to her surprise, her father. Marcus stood tall, his presence filling the room even though he said nothing at first. Maya froze, unsure of what was about to happen. The principal cleared his throat. "Maya," he began, "your father came in today to discuss what happened last week. I want you to know we take this very seriously." Maya glanced at her father. His face was calm, but his eyes held a quiet fire. He nodded at her, silently telling her it was all right. Marcus spoke in a steady voice, one that carried both authority and patience. "I don't want revenge," he said firmly. "I want accountability. My daughter deserves to come to school without fear. Every child does. What happened here is unacceptable, and I expect the school to take action." The teachers shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the weight in his words. The principal nodded quickly. You're right. We're investigating, and there will be consequences for those responsible. We'll also be reviewing our policies to make sure this doesn't happen again. Maya sat quietly, feeling both nervous and proud. She had never seen her father in this mode before, calm, but commanding. It reminded her that he was more than just the man who cooked pancakes on weekends. There was a strength in him that seemed unshakable, a strength he now used to protect her. After the meeting, Marcus walked Maya to her next class. As they reached the door, he bent down slightly so only she could hear him. Remember what I told you, he whispered. You don't have to shrink. You walk tall. They'll learn soon enough who you are. The next few days passed with a strange silence. The bullies were still around, but their laughter wasn't as loud. They whispered to each other, glancing at Maya, but something in their confidence seemed shaken. Perhaps the principal's warning reached them, or perhaps it was the quiet presence of Marcus in the school that morning, leaving an impression none of them could ignore. But still, Maya knew it wasn't over. The noose they had hung, the cruelty in their eyes, those things weren't erased overnight. She braced herself, knowing another storm could come. One afternoon, as she walked out of class, she overheard two of the bullies talking. Her dad scared the principal half to death, one muttered. The other laughed, though not as boldly as before. Yeah, but he's just some dad. What's he gonna do? They didn't know Marcus's history, the years of training, the battles fought in silence. They didn't know they had mocked the daughter of a man who had stared danger in the face more times than he could count. At home that evening, Maya told her father what she had overheard. Marcus smiled faintly, shaking his head. Let them think what they want, he said. The truth always comes out. That weekend, Marcus decided to spend more time with Maya outdoors. He took her to the park, where they jogged together, and later, to a quiet lake, where they sat watching the sunset. During these moments, he taught her not just about strength, but about patience. Sometimes battles aren't fought with fists or weapons, he said softly. Sometimes they're fought with dignity, with the way you carry yourself when others try to break you. Maya listened carefully, realizing that her father's calmness was not weakness, it was the kind of strength that came from discipline and experience. She began to see herself differently too. Maybe she didn't need to win over everyone at school. Maybe it was enough to hold her ground, to keep showing who she truly was. Still, Monday came again, and with it, the return of tension. As Maya entered the schoolyard, she noticed students gathering once more near the big oak tree. Her stomach tightened. For a second, she feared another cruel act had been planned. But when she got closer, she saw something different. The rope was gone, replaced by a sign that read, "Kindness starts here." The principal had clearly ordered it, perhaps as a way to turn shame into a lesson. Some students rolled their eyes, others ignored it, but Maya felt a small spark of hope. Maybe change was possible. But the bullies were not finished. They stood off to the side, their arms crossed, their smirks returning. One of them muttered loudly enough for her to hear, "Let's see how long she lasts." Maya walked past them, her heart pounding, but she kept her head high. She reminded herself that she wasn't alone anymore. Her father knew, the school knew, and deep inside, she carried a strength that could not be taken away. That evening, Marcus watched her carefully as she did her homework. He could see the determination in her face, the quiet courage growing day by day. He knew the battle wasn't over, but he also knew his daughter was learning the most important lesson of all, that real strength doesn't come from hurting others, but from refusing to be broken. Maya closed her books and looked at her father. "Do you think it will ever stop?" she asked softly. Marcus thought for a moment, then smiled gently. "I think people can change," he said. "But even if they don't, you'll keep standing. And that's enough." Maya nodded, holding on to his words. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she believed she could face it. Because she wasn't just a girl being tested by bullies. She was the daughter of a man whose quiet strength came from battles the world would never see. And that strength now lived in her too. The days that followed seemed calmer on the surface, but Maya could feel the undercurrent of tension beneath the walls of Brookville High. The rope was gone, the sign about kindness hung on the oak tree, and teachers appeared more watchful in the hallways. Yet the bullies had not disappeared. They were quieter, but their eyes still followed her, waiting for the next chance to make her stumble. Maya had grown used to walking with her head high, but it was not always easy. Some mornings she woke with a heavy heart, wondering if she had the strength to face another day of whispers and smirks. Still, she reminded herself of her father's words and pressed forward. She carried her books, sat in her classes, and gave her best effort. Slowly, some students began to notice her persistence. A few even offered polite greetings, though most stayed cautious, afraid of drawing unwanted attention. At home, Marcus was keeping a careful eye on his daughter. He had always believed in preparing for challenges, whether on missions far from home or in the quiet battles of everyday life. He spent evenings teaching Maya lessons that were not found in textbooks. He showed her how to breathe slowly when she felt nervous, how to listen carefully before speaking, and how to use silence as a form of strength. Maya absorbed every word, feeling her confidence grow little by little. One evening, after dinner, Marcus sat across from her at the table. "Maya," he said gently, "sometimes people think strength is about fighting back the same way they were attacked. But real strength often means holding your ground without lowering yourself. You don't need to match cruelty with cruelty. You show who you are by refusing to bend." Maya nodded thoughtfully. She had seen that calmness in him many times. When others might raise their voice, he remained steady. It was a strength that commanded respect without demanding it. She began to realize that she wanted to carry herself in the same way. But despite her father's guidance, the bullies were not finished. The group of students who had tormented her felt frustrated that their tricks had not broken her. They whispered among themselves, searching for new ways to test her. One morning, Maya walked into class to find her seat covered in scraps of paper and eraser shavings. Another time, she opened her locker to discover someone had stuffed it with crumpled notes filled with unkind words. Each time, she cleaned up quietly, refusing to show how deeply it stung. Her silence only seemed to confuse them more. The tension reached a new level during a school assembly. The students gathered in the gymnasium, the principal speaking about respect and kindness. Maya sat quietly, listening, when she suddenly heard a faint laugh behind her. A piece of folded paper dropped onto her lap. She hesitated, then opened it carefully. Inside was a drawing meant to mock her, a cruel reminder of the noose that had once hung outside. Her chest tightened, but she folded the paper calmly and placed it in her bag without turning around. After the assembly, Marcus was waiting outside the school to pick her up. Maya climbed into the car, her face calm but her eyes distant. Marcus glanced at her, reading her silence as easily as he might read a map. "Something happened today," he said softly. It wasn't a question, it was a knowing statement. Maya sighed and nodded. She told him about the note, her voice quiet but steady. Marcus listened carefully, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "You did the right thing," he said after a moment. "You didn't let them see you break. But this isn't something you should carry alone anymore." That evening, Marcus made a decision. He called the school and arranged a meeting with the principal, teachers, and the parents of the bullies. Maya was nervous about the idea, but her father's calm presence gave her courage. The meeting was held in the library the next afternoon. Maya sat beside her father, her hands folded in her lap. Across the table sat the bullies and their parents, some looking defensive, others embarrassed. The principal opened the discussion, explaining the seriousness of the situation. But it was Marcus who commanded the room when he finally spoke. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he spoke in a tone that was calm but filled with weight. "I served this country for years," he said, his eyes steady. "I've been in places where people fought for freedoms that many here take for granted. My daughter deserves the same respect as any other child. Hanging a rope, writing cruel words, mocking her, those are not harmless jokes. Those are acts meant to wound. And I will not allow it." The room grew silent. Even the bullies, who had once laughed so boldly, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their parents looked down, ashamed. Marcus continued, his voice still calm. "I am not here for revenge. I am here for accountability. These young people need to understand the weight of their actions. And this school must ensure every student is safe." The principal nodded quickly, promising stricter consequences and programs to address respect and inclusion. Some of the parents apologized quietly, their faces pale with realization. The bullies, who had once seemed so powerful in the schoolyard, now looked small and uncertain. Maya sat beside her father, her chest swelling with pride. She had always known he was strong, but now she saw his strength in a new way. It wasn't just physical, it was the strength of discipline, of speaking with authority without losing control. In that moment, she realized her father's presence was enough to change the entire room. After the meeting, as they walked to the car, Maya looked up at him. "Dad," she whispered, "how do you stay so calm when you're angry?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Because anger burns out quickly. But calmness lasts longer. When you stay calm, you keep your strength. And strength is what people remember." That night, Maya thought about everything that had happened. She still felt nervous about going to school, but she also felt lighter. She had seen her bullies shrink in the presence of her father's quiet power. She had seen their parents realize the seriousness of their children's actions. For the first time since she arrived in Brookville, she felt that maybe things were beginning to shift. The next morning, as she walked through the school gates, she noticed something different. Students looked at her with new eyes. Some avoided her gaze, others offered small nods, and a few even smiled. The bullies kept their distance, their usual smirks gone. Maya walked forward, her steps steady, carrying herself with the dignity her father had taught her. She didn't know if the challenges were over. Perhaps there would still be whispers, perhaps some students would never change. But she knew one thing for certain, she no longer carried the weight alone. She had her father's strength behind her, and more importantly, she had discovered a growing strength within herself. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt hopeful. She realized that courage wasn't about never feeling afraid. It was about walking forward even when fear tried to hold you back. And with her father's quiet example guiding her, she knew she could keep walking tall, no matter what lay ahead. The following weeks at Brookville High were unlike the ones that had come before. The cruel laughter that once echoed through the hallways grew faint. The bullies kept to themselves, their voices low, their once bold smirks gone. Something had shifted after the meeting with the parents, the principal, and Maya's father. The students who had once followed the bullies' lead now seemed uncertain, no longer so quick to join their cruel games. Maya noticed the change, though she did not celebrate too loudly in her heart. She knew people could be quick to forget lessons if they weren't reminded. But she also knew that she had survived the worst of it. Each day she walked taller, her steps steady, her eyes focused forward. She still felt nervous sometimes, still carried the memory of the noose swinging from the tree, but she no longer let those fears control her. Her father's presence continued to be her quiet anchor. Every evening, Marcus asked her how her day had gone. Sometimes she shared the details, other times she simply smiled and said it was all right. He didn't press her, he trusted her strength, and she trusted his. In their quiet moments together, she felt safer than anywhere else in the world. One afternoon, Maya's English teacher asked her to stay after class. Nervously, she approached the desk. The teacher smiled warmly and said, "Maya, I've noticed how hard you've been working, even through challenges. I'd like you to consider entering your essay into the state writing contest. I believe your voice deserves to be heard." Maya's eyes widened. For so long she had felt invisible or unwanted, but now, someone saw her potential. She nodded shyly and thanked her teacher. That evening, she told her father, who beamed with pride. "This is your chance to let your voice shine," he said. "Words can be as powerful as any action." Over the next week, Maya poured her heart into the essay. She didn't write about the bullies directly, but she wrote about strength, about finding courage in the face of fear, and about the lessons her father had taught her. Each sentence carried pieces of her story, woven gently into a message of hope. When she finally handed it in, she felt a sense of relief, as if she had shared a part of herself with the world. While she waited for the results, life at school grew calmer. Slowly, a few students who had once stayed away began to speak to her. Some asked for help with homework, others offered a seat at their lunch table. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, but it was enough to remind Maya that change was possible. She learned to smile again in the hallways, to greet others with kindness even when she still carried scars inside. One morning, as she walked into the courtyard, she noticed one of the bullies sitting alone. He looked uneasy, his eyes on the ground. To her surprise, when she passed by, he mumbled, "Sorry." It was barely audible, but it was there. Maya paused for a moment, then nodded quietly before continuing on. She didn't need grand apologies or friendship from those who had hurt her. The simple acknowledgement was enough. When the announcement of the writing contest winners came weeks later, Maya sat in her classroom, her heart pounding. The teacher stood at the front, reading the results with a smile. "We have wonderful news," she said. "Our very own Maya has won second place in the state contest. Her essay will be published in the local paper." The classroom erupted in applause. Maya's cheeks grew warm, but she couldn't stop smiling. For the first time since she had come to Brookville, she felt truly seen, not for being different, not for being mocked, but for the strength of her words. That evening, when she told her parents, her mother hugged her tightly, and her father's eyes shone with pride. The day the newspaper published her essay, Marcus bought 3 copies. He folded one neatly and kept it in his wallet, telling Maya, "This way, no matter where I go, I carry your strength with me." The simple gesture filled her with warmth. Life at Brookville High continued, but it was no longer the same. Maya still faced challenges, as every teenager does, but the shadow of the bullies no longer hung so heavy over her. The memory of the news still lingered, but it no longer defined her story. Instead, her story became one of courage, resilience, and quiet victory. The bullies, once feared by many, began to fade into the background. Some changed, some stayed the same, but none of them held the same power they once had. Their cruel act had not broken Maya, it had revealed her strength. And in the process, it had shown the entire school that respect and dignity were more powerful than fear. On a warm spring afternoon, Maya and her father took a walk by the lake again, just as they had before. The sun dipped low, painting the water in shades of gold. Maya looked at him and said softly, "Dad, do you think I'll always have to be this strong?" Marcus smiled, his eyes reflecting both pride and tenderness. "Strength isn't something you put on like armor and then take off," he said. "It becomes a part of you. But remember, being strong doesn't mean you can't feel, or cry, or hope. It means you keep moving forward even when life tests you. And you, Maya, are already stronger than most people ever realize." She thought about his words, letting them settle deep inside her. She realized that her strength didn't come only from enduring the cruelty of others, but also from the love and wisdom her father gave her. That strength was now hers to carry into the future. As the days turned into months, Maya's essay continued to inspire others who read it. Some parents wrote letters to the school, thanking her for her words. Teachers shared it with their classes as an example of honesty and resilience. And though Maya never sought fame, she felt proud that her story, in her own quiet way, could help others. By the end of the school year, Maya stood taller than she ever had before. She had faced darkness and walked through it with dignity. She had discovered the courage to speak, the strength to endure, and the hope to keep moving forward. And though her classmates never knew the full extent of her father's past as a Navy SEAL, they had seen enough to understand one thing: behind Maya's calm presence was a strength that could not be shaken. In time, the memory of the cruel act that once defined her faded, replaced by the image of a girl who refused to bow, who carried herself with grace, and who reminded others that respect begins with seeing the humanity in every person. And as Maya walked across the schoolyard one bright morning, the breeze tugging gently at her hair, she realized something important. She was no longer just the girl who had been targeted. She was Maya, the girl who had stood tall, who had spoken through her words, and who had turned pain into a story of strength. Her journey was far from over, but she was ready. Because no matter what challenges came her way, she knew she carried within her the quiet, unshakable strength of her father, and the growing light of her own courage.